Definitely don't need to go to the gym when you're lifting heavy wheels all the time. Whatever I'm doing, I'm screwing it up. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Okay guys, so it's a new day guys, and it's time to test fit the wheels on this bike. Finally, feel like I've been waiting forever. I can't even do actually a permanent fit on the rear wheel because I'm still waiting for a new sprocket for that. But the front wheel is ready to go on, so I'm gonna do a little test fit here, make sure that everything is spaced out properly for the brake and stuff, and then after that, if everything's good to go, I'll be ready to put it on the bike permanently. Okay, now we can go. So I'm just doing everything up just loose. Just gonna run these up just so that they're holding the axle and not actually squeezing it tight. Nothing needs to be super tight yet. And I know that they're actually holding the axle up in place just by looking at the gap here, the top part of the fork. Make sure that that gap is actually closed and the axle is actually tight up against the fork leg there. There we go, that's good. And I'm just gonna do this up, not all the way, just enough, just so it's snug. I'm not gonna torque anything. So I just wanna fit my brake, make sure that I don't have to space my brake rotor out at all or anything like that to get the caliper on. Yeah, we're gonna see how it all fits. So that's the next step, just fit the brake and hopefully I don't have to space anything out. Okay guys, it's another day, as you can probably tell by my outfit. I didn't end up coming out here yesterday until kind of late in the day, so it got late before I was done doing all of this, so I decided to save it for the morning, and now it's the morning. So I fit my brake caliper last night, so I know that it's all fitting good, but I'm just gonna show you guys how you want it to be fitting. So I'm just gonna get this on here, and I don't have any of the bolts in or anything like that because I don't need them yet. So I'm just gonna spread my brake pads apart so that I can get this fitting on my disc. Then slide this up here. Okay, put a couple of these in just so that it doesn't fall down. You gotta have this apart to put it actually on the bike because of how the mounting pins and everything have to go in, but I will do all of that also when I am done showing you guys this. Stick that in there just so that that holds on there. Okay guys, so this is how you kind of want to fit this. You can see I'm actually holding it. I'm holding it so that the inside of the caliper is held tight against the brake rotor. So you can see I've got a gap there. And the reason how come you want a gap there is because as your brake pads wear, the whole assembly is gonna move to the outside. So you don't want that touching your fork leg because you want room for your brakes to adjust as they wear. So now that I know my brake is going to fit and there's enough clearance there on the front end, I can actually just start doing everything up permanently. I'll put my brake rotor on permanently. Right now I just have it on there with temporary bolts, just 2 bolts holding it on. Do up my axle and then I'll put my caliper on. When you do your axle up, you want to do up your axle nut before you do up the slider nuts on the bottom cap here on the other side of the fork. And you also want to make sure that you don't have any weight of the motorcycle actually sitting on the front tire so that everything will be able to move as you tighten it up. And then the axle nut gets done up to 50 foot-pounds. There we go. Once you have the axle nut done up, then you can come over onto the other side of the bike and do up these axle slider nuts. You want to make sure that the gap here remains even from side to side. So you don't want to have one side of the gap bigger than the other. So the axle slider nuts get done up to 11 foot-pounds, and I'm just going to do them each a little bit at a time, just so that I keep the gap here remaining even. That's 11 there. This one should almost be there. Right, there you go. All right, now everything's done up there. I'm gonna put my brake rotor on permanently before I lower the bike or before I put any weight on here so that I can spin that, make it a little easier to deal with. So the reason I have my brake rotor on here just with temporary bolts is just because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't gonna have to take the whole thing off if I bolted it on there permanently, if I had to end up spacing it out at all, but it's good, so I can just bolt it on permanently now. So one thing I always do too when I'm doing something like this is before I torque anything, I always tighten it by hand. Not tight, just snug, so that I'm not doing like 100 turns on the torque wrench. And something that you're gonna wanna double check too is that your washers on the inside are actually sitting flat on the hub so that they're not going up to where the casting actually kind of sticks out. It's not a casting on these hubs, I guess it's a weld is what it looks like. So you just want to double check that, and you can do that just by rotating the tire and looking down it and just looking at each washer, making sure you don't see a gap. You'll see it in there. It'll be crooked. If you don't have it sitting flat, you aren't going to get proper torque on your brake, and you'll know how important brakes are. So now that I know that that's all good, I'm just going to tighten this up, and the brake rotor is done up to 21 to 27 foot-pounds on the laced wheels. I'll probably do it up to almost the highest torque spec since it's my brakes. And this is one of those things that you want to do up incrementally as well. So you don't want to just tighten one of them down to the highest torque right away. You want to tighten them all down incrementally, and you want to go in kind of a pattern. Okay, we'll go to the next one then. So I'm going to go one, skip one, go one, skip one. Okay, good. That's all of them. And another thing is I always, after I've done them all up torqued once, then I go around it in a circular pattern just to double check, make sure they're all actually torqued. So that's good now. Right, now everything is done up. I can actually just put my brake on. And you want to just start with the inside half of it. And these pins that actually hold everything in place, you want to give a little bit of anti-seize too. Anti-seize will just help them to slide a little bit nicer. So before everything goes together, you got to put your mounting pin in the piston side of the caliper. And this is actually an aftermarket caliper. So if this was stock, this pin would already just be in here. It's not removable, they're riveted in. But this one's aftermarket, so it's actually removable. And it goes in here, and it goes with this spring here. So this is all gonna go together like this. And this has actually got like a flat head for a screwdriver head on there, which is kind of annoying. I never use screwdrivers for that. This is actually a piece from a square, and I'll just use that to hold that like that. So that actually works a lot better than trying to use a screwdriver on there. And also another thing too, because these are aftermarket, it doesn't actually like fit very well here. So I actually have to space it out on the back here with a washer. That's just so that the acorn nut that comes with it actually will bottom out on the washer rather than bottoming out on the pin. And so I'm just gonna put a little bit of blue Loctite on here. And of course, because this is aftermarket, there's no torque spec for this. So I'll just do it up. All right, now that I've got my mounting pin in, now this spring can actually, I like to put it on the brake itself, I think, because I think it makes it a little easier for putting the whole thing on. And then my other mounting pin here, also want to give just a little bit of anti-seize too, because this also needs to slide. Okay. And now I'll just put that in there like that. Now, and take the first half of the caliper, hold my pins while I drop this in place. Okay. And now you just kind of want to put all your pieces on these pins. So we start with the other brake pad, and then you got the plate here. And then the other half of the brake caliper will go on to that top mounting pin, and the bottom mounting pin will go into that hole on the fork. So just line everything up. A little bit tricky to line up. Got like 4 pins you gotta line up. I can see why people don't really like the design of these banana calipers because they do not seem like the best design. There we go. I've already got Loctite in my caliper there because I got ahead of myself and I Loctited this all together without realizing that it actually has to be a part to go on the bike. Still got a decent amount of resistance in there from the Loctite, so I'm not going to put new Loctite in. I'm not actually tightening any of these down yet. I'm just getting them done up. If you tighten one down, or if you tighten one or two down, then suddenly it makes it hard to put the other ones in. And for the banana calipers, we tighten them to 35 foot-pounds. 35. I'm gonna go about halfway on each of them, and then I'll tighten them all up to the proper torque. Here we go. That's the front wheel. Before I can put the rear wheel on the bike, guys, I'm gonna have to do a little bit of work to this swing arm. Not much. I'm just gonna have to take a little bit of material out here because my brake mount here actually hits the swing arm. And the reason for that is because these round tube style swing arms would have never actually been used with disc brakes. They would have always had drum brakes on them. So they're not set up for a brake mount like the ones that come with the banana calipers. So I'm just gonna take out just a little bit of material here and then a little bit down on the bottom here. You can't really see because the axle's there. I'm just gonna grind that away, just a very small amount, and that'll give me the clearance I need for that brake mount. Okay, so now this is all ground down and looking good. You can't even tell that I did anything because I touched it up with just a little bit of paint here. And I'm ready to put my back wheel on. I got my brake mounted onto the brake mount, and it's just the same principle basically as it going on the front end. Instead of the front end though, it's just going on this boomerang looking brake mount. And then the brake mount acts as a spacer, so I'm just gonna put everything on. Now, so when you're doing the brake side, you want to spread your brake pads out and just fit them over the rotor, and then you can just rest it on top of the rotor as you kind of shimmy your brake mount into place. And then you want to also get your axle in there too, but you can just rest this all kind of on the rotor as you just wiggle your axle through. And you want to have your adjusting spacer on there. That'd be the spacer that goes against the axle adjuster. Then I'll just slip my spacer into place. Okay, there we go. Everything's lined up nicely. My brake will be fine just sitting here just like this. And this is all just gonna be temporary for now because I gotta wait until I can actually line everything up before I can actually torque my rear wheel down. But if you were torquing it down, it's 50 foot-pounds for laced wheels. Do these up a little bit so that they're not all floppy on here. Just tight enough that everything's not gonna flop around. Well, that is the dad bike back on wheels, guys. So it feels pretty good. I'm glad it's on wheels because it was pretty rickety up there on the stand and like making me super paranoid every time I had to lift it or lower it. It seemed like it was just hanging on by a thread. But it's on wheels now, it's all good. The front wheel is on permanently. The back wheel I can't torque down yet until I've got the new drive sprocket on my transmission and the transmission back in the chassis so that I can make sure everything is aligned properly. You all know about that. So I've got my new drive sprocket. It actually showed up today, and perfect timing too because the rear wheel sprocket showed up with it. So I was able to actually put the wheel together, and yeah, it's all good now. So it's up there and it's looking good as ever. So I just gotta do my transmission, probably will be the next thing, putting that new sprocket on, and then I'm gonna open the thing up and just take a look inside, make sure the gears aren't all chewed up looking, because there's been a few surprises on this bike. There's some stripped out holes on the engine that we're gonna have to re-tap and different things like that. So I definitely wanna open that transmission up and put a new gasket in the top anyway, just to make sure that's not gonna leak, and check those gears in there also, because, well, you just never know. now, and this bike's been full of surprises so far, so I definitely don't trust much of the work that's been done on it previously. This bike's actually not even like a huge project when you think of fabricating wise. Like, there's not going to be a whole lot of fabricating on it, but it is a project in the sense that it's never actually been assembled properly by like any owners in recent history, just judging by the stuff that has been done to it before. Like, whoever was working on it before either just didn't care, they didn't know what they were doing. A lot of the stuff we need to make sure we fit properly, and that front wheel having 0 end play is just an example of that. And that's basically it for this video, guys. I hope you guys liked it, and if you guys like what you see, or if you just like me, or even if you don't like me but you like my bikes, then like this video, comment, subscribe, to all those things you guys do. And like always, my lovely YouTube people, I'll catch you all on the flip side. Peace. I'm actually just... And for the banana calipers, why does everything have to beep? Oh my gosh.